Salish territory, the traditional territories of the Squamish, Selbortut, and Quaquetum First Nations. I want to share a story with you. I was privileged to go to Afghanistan in the fall of 2008 and 2009, respectively. My brief visit to Bamiyan, I met Anisha, an elderly person. She was seated on the floor and she asked me to take her photo. Looking at her image, she said, "Look at the wrinkles on my face. Each wrinkle represents a tapestry. And the tapestry is being built by the women of Afghanistan, not outsiders. Sit with the women and connect their stories. And once you have done that, then you share stories with others." So I think this has been an inspiration for arranging this particular panel on International Women's Day. The theme is, of course, inclusion. And what we are going to do this afternoon is that we have talented speakers who are engaged in advocacy work. So they will actually relay their experiential knowledge and also complement that with their work with newcomers, immigrants, and also Afghan women. Now, our topic is remaking home in the diaspora, migrations, and belonging. Now, this, of course, the title itself suggests that this is a very nuanced and complex topic. When one is displaced, it doesn't happen as a matter of course that one is able to settle down in another country, particularly where one is racialized. So there are lots of challenges, but at the same time, we need to emphasize that women that who we are covering today, but we also have a broader platform, that they have aspirations and that they remake their homes in such a manner whereby we come to know alternative way of life, whereby we all benefit. So essentially, if I were to sum up, I would say that what we are looking at is female migratory refugees. And that what women have to offer is how they rejuvenate families and communities under circumstances that are harsh. So one point that I want to emphasize is that it will be very helpful if we have a collaborative session later on after the speakers have shared their knowledge with us. So I would encourage you to share your stories, your poems, and any other form of critical pedagogy that you feel comfortable with. So we can all learn together, and that is the idea. So now I will introduce the speakers. Oh, okay. So now I will introduce the speakers.
Thank you. I'll introduce the speakers, and I will introduce the speakers as this, one at a time, so we do justice to all of them. So our first speaker is Saida Hazir. Saida came to Canada in 1998. She worked as a nurse in various care homes and hospitals across the Lower Mainland and has dedicated her time to volunteering for her community. Saida has also worked to sponsor over 30 family members to come to Canada and supported them through their transition. Moreover, Saida has also started a pilot initiative project entitled Duktaram. And this is intended to support women's education in rural parts of Canada. In rural parts of Afghanistan. Saida is committed to being a lifelong learner and has also started taking counseling courses to further her education and better understand how to support her patients.
Hello, everyone. My name is Saida. We are talking about women in Afghanistan in March 8th, while in our country, all schools are closed for the girls, and women and girls don't have any access to education. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the history. Women in Afghanistan, like any other underdeveloped countries, they have been fighting patriarchal restriction forever. It was only starting in 1960s and 1970s that women in Afghanistan starting emerging to the public sphere and getting an education and entering workforce. Unfortunately, that small progress was cut down sharp by the invasion of USSR and subsequent civil war. So, for this one? This one? Like press it? Yeah, okay. So in the 10 years war with the USSR, Afghan women who lived in the countryside faced a lot of displacement, violence, and also loss. And millions of Afghan women became refugees in the neighboring countries like Iran, Pakistan, India, and other countries. And women who stayed and couldn't escape, they face like loss of their brothers, husbands, fathers, and sometimes the entire families. And also their lives were at risk because of the constant like fighting, bombing, and landmines. Furthermore, women who lived in the countryside was at risk for sexual violence, kidnapping, and rapes, not only by the USSR forces, but also by the fellow Afghan who belonged to the rival Mujahideen groups. In 1990s, when the Mujahideen took over Afghanistan, the war engulfed the entire nations. And now the women's situation became worse. There were so many, and who lived in Afghanistan know that so many like kidnapping, rapes, like sexual violence, not just in the countryside, but now in the big cities like Kabul. The city became dystopian as the rule of law failed. And Mujahideen soldiers went to civilian homes, looting and like people's houses. And Afghan women like continued to face like more displacement. Some moved to the other part of country where it was like safer, and some went outside and became like refugees. But now they had to deal with two things. One is the trauma that they had in their own country, and the other thing, the issue of migration. And what I'm seeing here, I lived on that time in my country, and I was a doctor in the biggest military hospital in Afghanistan. And there is always the civilian casualties come to my hospital. So what I see here, I witness it. So I decided to leave Kabul, where I grew up. And I went to the northern part because there was much fighting. So, and I went there with my husband, no other families. And I went to a province called Baghlan. So I went to the Baghlan and I settled in a little city called Pulakhumri. So it was less developed than Kabul. And and I was pregnant at that time. So after a few weeks, in the middle of the day, I went into labor in a house that was cold, no electricity. My husband was at work, and I did not have any family member to take care of me postpartum. So, and I gave birth to my daughter all alone by myself. Don't worry, I survived that. And this is, whenever I talk about it, it makes me like really upset. But in the meantime, this is one of the most amazing history in my life. And one day I will write about it in details. So anyway, it took us sometimes some years to build our life in this small town. We made friends, we made connection, and we were really happy. And in my mind, I thought that I would never leave that city. But it was a short live there. So in 1996, when the Taliban took over Afghanistan, in 1998, they took over Baghlan. So, and I had to leave. And we had to leave and leave behind our sweet home, our best friends, and our trustful neighbors. And because my husband was targeted by Taliban, he was an orthopedic surgeon in the hospital. Anyway, so this time I decided that I crossed the border, and I did. And I came to Pakistan. Again, I'm alone in Pakistan, in a foreign place far from home. So I have to make my home there. And I try so hard to make things like normal for my children and for myself. It was a strange situation. Creating a home, while you're moving. And I had a goal, that I moved to the West. And this is why, so I try so hard to make everything normal for my children and to bring stability and stillness while knowing that I would move to a place with more opportunities. This looks like that you bring stability in a constant movement. And I think that every Afghan woman has this ability to bring this stability in the home. And you know, and I kind of accepted this constant, to adapt to this constant like moving, and I bring stability. And I think, Shanaz Jan, this stability is part of Afghan women identity. So that was my life in Pakistan. So my goal achieved. And in 2001, I came to Canada. The first night that I landed in Vancouver, I had the best sleep for the first time in many, many years. And that is like unforgettable for me. But the peace in Canada was the peace of no war. Canada has its own challenges. And the making home here was the most like difficult one for me. It was the most difficult one. The dream of returning home became less real. And this was it. This place had to be my home, whether I wanted or no. The cultural differences, the language barrier, and to integrate to a completely different society was an uphill and a struggle for me. And as an educated person who was a medical doctor back home, I had to deal with with great pain of losing my academy and professional credentials. Many years of hard work, studying, and work experience went down to the drain. And now I had to start it from square one. But as an adult woman with 3 kids to feed. So, and I think that I felt on that time that many things were stolen, like had been stolen from me in exchange for the promised safety and peace. And it was humiliating. And actually, it has a very big impact on my self-worth, and it was devastating. So despite this feeling, I had to carry on and make my life here. So I'm just gonna go to this one. So this is Pakistan. In this picture that you see, this is my son, and these are my 2 daughters. And this picture, when we get our citizenship, this is the picture of that in Pakistan. Yeah. Sorry, I have to. The problem was with me that how I could like write connection here, and how I find my way here, who to speak to show me the opportunity that to be like I be the equivalent of that say that I was back home, and who like pay for all that. And also I have like 3 children who needed attention and who needed guidance, and also they went through tremendous changes in their very young life. So I had to, it wasn't in the solitude and familiarity of life in Canada, I had to make new goals. And I had to found like my way. And I had to accept myself, the person as I was going to be here, as opposite the one that I had been back home. Otherwise, I could not make my life and my home here. So I studied while I was working and raising my children. And I became a nurse. And I really was very passionate about my career. And I really wanted to be something in the medical field. That was about me. But what about my children? Also, I decided and made my decision. I allowed my children to be part of this society here, while imparting to them the importance of my heritage, my language, and my religion. And also, I allowed my children to adopt Western values and beliefs. And for that, I met with great criticism and judgment from my own Afghan community. I had to answer the question why I let my daughter to wear like shorts. And later in life, I had to answer the question why my daughter had boyfriends and why they didn't get married right away. Sometimes I question myself, maybe I made a mistake, if I should be more strict to them. And I had to deal with that. And it's not easy to go against your community. It's really hard. But there is one thing I was determined about, and it was that I want to build here a home that there is love peace and stability. And I did. And I did not want to have like a struggle with my children. And I did not want to have that, the cultural like war between generations that I witnessed in many Afghan families. So my story and the histories of my sisters, my friends, and a lot of other Afghan women demonstrated the resilience, hard work, patience, and our base survival skills that I think every Afghan woman has. The war back home broke our families apart. Not just getting people killed in the war, also the war scattered us around the world. And we have to deal with that. But this did not stop us from making our lives. The experience of being refugees and survival of wars was unjust and unfair. But within this, we managed to build lives for ourselves. And we always strive for a better one, at least for a peaceful. Thank you. And these are my 3 children. That's
So our second speaker is Gulayle Habib. I actually met her 20 years ago. She has worked with the displaced populations in Canada and abroad over 25 years. She was a former program officer with UNDP, experienced in community-centered engagement in Central and South Asian regions, and involved with grassroots women's mobilization and community organizing among displaced populations. Since coming to Canada as an Afghan refugee, she worked for over 14 years with the Resettlement Assistance Program, ISS of BC, with direct oversight of the Syrian operation and intimate involvement in the broader restructuring of settlement sector, to include the lived experience of refugee migrant professionals. She went on this capacity to cultivate a community-centered settlement vision as a director of settlement and employment at Kivasa Neighborhood House, as the board of directors of the National Women's Economic Council, and currently serves as the director of settlement and integration programs at Burnaby Neighborhood House.
I hope it doesn't sound like lecturing, but I will be here because I have a few plain words, no PowerPoint, not the beautiful picture as Sadia has shared. But on this year, the International Women's Day, I will share a few plain words drawn from personal experiences and diaspora in migration and displacement. I profoundly thank you, Sadia, for your trust and sharing your stories with us. Deeply appreciate. And as you could imagine, these stories are not easy. When we talk about migration, displacement, war, trauma, and remaking life, these are very complex. Each one requires books to, or require hours to talk about it. They bring back traumas to us. These are real life experiences. As Saida was talking, I was shivering inside, remembering those days. So these are not, so it's very hard to think about where to start from and where to end, which aspects to cover, which aspect to neglect. And that's the thing. So for me, what I do, just with respect of the time allocation in order to stay focused and not be sidetracked. I have a few pages to focus on reading as I put my thoughts on it. So it is important that I disclaim that I'm no more an expert on Afghan women's experiences than what life has taught me. So what I will be sharing here is drawn from generalization. As a native Afghan, I'm here with you as a refugee settler on this beautiful land of the traditional unceded occupied lands of the indigenous Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, the Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. So within the context of remaking life in diaspora, I will start a few words on women in war. That is where we come from. With the scars of war, with the traumas of war, we make life. So thinking of women in life, it's a peculiar trait of war that really it begins gender-centered issue, yet somehow through unleashing, at the end of the day, it split nations into two, dividing women from men. History tells us that few women have actually been involved in the process of war making. Yet despite the lack of involvement, women always become the iconic victims of war at the end of the day. In the songs and poetry of places like Afghanistan, the typical position of women in war has been grievers. From the time that any war begins to the time it is fully mature, the more pronounced line begins to form between genders, more often than not, secluding women further and further into a state of solitary confinement. Suffice to say that women are affected very differently by war than men. The typical pattern of workplace for women is solitary confinement, follows this indiscriminately, heedless of race, culture, or religion. The basic element of it is war ravaged the infrastructure of the nation so completely that all layers of society are breached. The economy is destroyed, the communities are fractured, families are torn up. It destroys all balancing mechanism created within social networks that ensure the fair treatment of members. War damaged all of this. At the same time, war makes the position of women more precarious. The division of labor that generally associated with women with domestic and men with public step into rapid perverse form during the war. To make sense of these changes, people draw on discourses available in their previous stable societies to make sense of the systemic subordination of women. In the Afghan example, Islam became an agent, as well as the so-called tribal traditions. However, I think it's important not to give too much credence to this justification because women's right is by no means simply a modern or Western world-specific notion. I live and grew up in Afghanistan before the Soviet invasion, after and during that time. While there was a clear understanding of the role of women in the society, women were not constrained by this. Certainly I was not, and I have for the same years graduated as a civil engineer during perhaps your husband when you were there. So I have more gray hair than Sadi. But I was not, and it certainly wasn't for during my frequent visit to the countryside. It seemed that there was harmony in gender-based division of labor. Mainly this harmony was generated by a sense of security. Elder women held oftentimes more equal authority to male elders in the rural areas. The power of authority having more to do with personal characteristic than in relations than purely gender. So from an urban perspective, the goal of their goal in life was much more reachable than us urban women, which means that they were much healthier women psychologically as well. If sanity can be defined by the mind's knowledge that bodies inhabit has a purpose, then these women had the sanity. All that changed, both in the cities and in the rural areas. So there were, from the urban perspective, the goal of life were much reachable for us urban women, which means that they were much healthier women psychologically. But if sanity could be defined by the mind's knowledge that body and habit has a purpose, then these women had a sanity. All that changed both in the cities and rural areas with the invasions and wars, repeated invasions and wars. The close-knit community relationship that ensured the safety net of the situation of abuse of power was broken because of war and invasion. The same culture that protected and harmonized women's relations with men was now distorted to stigmatize women. Not religion, not tribalism, but war caused the severance of women from society. One of the most painful causes of trauma is the moment when one feels stripped naked of all safety barriers. Yet, still there was a purpose for them, for us, to protect the children. So imagine the psychological damage that sinks in as one by one the children are taken. And this is the chapter of displacement now in migration. By the time the war was well underway, the population fled towards the borders. For the women, those camps were the final stop on the journey of mental disintegration. The raising children was suddenly less reachable goal too in this foreign place, so far from where the women taught to raise their children in those lush valleys. Soon their confinement was so complete that women outdoor was taboo. So they had absolutely no idea about the world that their children, especially the sons roaming around growing up in. And let's pause for a minute. With the alienation between sons and mothers, the dividing line between gender that this war caused was defined. This is what we see today. With the alienation between sons and mothers, the defining line this war caused is defined now that we see the result. Why women are out from the public sphere, why women are not educated, why schools are closed. So just remember what happened, where the division has started. So Robert Fisk also covered much of this in his book, The War for Civilization, if you're interested to read. Now, with remaking home, it's important to know that during the journey of migration, our migration, refugees are mostly remaking home multiple times, not upon arrival in Canada, not born upon arrival in Canada. We make this multiple journeys of remaking and again and again. And some of you in this room will remember that, how that remaking from scratch is again and again. How raising children, how starting from zero with your education, your social network, your capital network. Anyway, I told you that I should stick to my reading my papers, otherwise it will be. When I left Afghanistan in 1992 with my husband and two children, aged 3 and 5, after it was a months of heavy fight from house to house, from street to street, we were assuming we will go back within a week or a month the latest. But we stayed there, and instead we stayed remaking home in Pakistan. At that time, I was working with United Nations in Kabul, and that operation was closed during the war and reopened in Pakistan, which somehow became an income for me and my family, but also our multiple other family and friends with that one income to survive during that time. So with millions of refugees in the camp and 1,000 refugees, urban refugees. So there were phases of refugee in the camp before, during the Soviet invasion. And then the Civil War or the war for power, this was a wave of urban refugees who came to Pakistan and multiple other countries as well. With millions of refugees in the camp, thousands in the urban area, I was part of a volunteer network in addition to my paid job, working with other refugee women and their families to mobilize communities for peace and human rights advocacy at the grassroots level. In these 7 years, March 8, which is today, was a significant day for us. So it was for us, it presented the podium for our voices at the world stage, breaking the silence around self-empowerment. This day was combined with many preparation and campaigns locally and internationally, with a dignity that it gave us. And it was unlike the images that refugees you might have or we might have in this part of the world. So refugees have a very busy life. And I just wanted to share some of those work that we had. So the children, refugee children, were encouraged to take their pens and make this collection of their wishes for peace, regardless of any artistic, but their wishes and their eagerness for peace. These collections have beautiful drawings of reflecting how everybody is eager for peace. Thousands of children participated in these campaigns, and that it was published into calendars. These calendars were sent to the warlords with a strong message of enough with fight. Even if you were killed, a mother, a daughter, a sister, no others. So these were powerful changes at that time, and also stories, horrible stories, as Sadia has mentioned, of the women suffering during those horrific time of war and torture. They were published, and also international campaigns on women's rights and advocacy around women's participation in the peace-building process. As we were talking, you talk about peace with those who have no interest about peace. Talk about peace with those who are interested about peace, the women and children. So these were remarkable times. And 25 years back, when I came to Canada with my husband and our 3 children, we were sponsored by a sister and their 2 friends, which I wish to mention their name, Harry Harshorn and Lynn Carter. I still remember them as close friends. Like most refugees, I too came from a very busy life, a proactive life, helping ourselves and others. Despite being able to work with the settlement sector on my 3rd month of arrival. But March 8, again, another March 8 came fast, disappointingly fast and uneventful. So I was surprised to find myself without the impassionate right-oriented goals which used to fuel my day during the refugee years. So a day before March 8, I shuffled through my papers and decided to compile a summary and send a summary on the historical background of Afghan women. And I sent the summary to Vancouver Sun. So to my surprise, the next day I saw the Vancouver Sun publish this. Kathy Gannon has published this, the full-page article. And later on, I learned that publishing an article in Vancouver Sun is a big deal in Canada. And within the 24 hours and without changes, that is impossible. But anyway, how in this article, the only thing they changed was the picture and the title, a hot title in a picture. So hopefully this article helped with the changing the Western presumption of women in burqa or hood cover representing oppression, and the man in turban and beard as terrorists. That was hopefully this article helped with. The most profound change of this for me was a sense of responsibility of my contribution as a new member of Canadian society, and realizing that it's together that we can learn and unlearn. The past 25 years of services with immigrants and refugees in Canada have given me the opportunity to see the situation of newly arrived refugees in Canada from various parts of the world, in a deeper understanding of their struggles in remaking home. Despite the fact that there are multiple barriers, but now additionally the barrier is language. In a pure fact that everything is so foreign. That element of foreignness itself is a barrier. It makes it overcoming their depression and mental health and the traumas that you're coming with. So the healing process is long, and the fast-paced West does not usually have time to allow time for healing. Go and work, learn income, learn the language, fit in into this society, right? So, however, many of us find the healing by joining hands of solidarity and allyship and looking for common suffering with other women to give a purpose and lessen these barriers. As Gary Gaddis, the famous poet, wrote in his book, Drink the Bitter Root, it's our vulnerability that brings us together. So many successful social, economic, and political contribution of immigrant and refugee are here, both men and women, at the vast survival scale and the resilience the refugees and individual refugees are bringing, as well as the collective effort and the passionate work of the professionals in the immigrant and refugee sector, make this a huge difference, making life, remaking life possible for ourselves and others. Um, the most important way allowing us to imagine a future free of strife and conflict, which was a theme of this discussion, I think it's in the face of the new generation. Our children, the new generation who are coming, I'm looking at the youngest in this room, that is where the future will be. So this is a generation that most of them either they left their home country very young, or grew up in refugee life, or grew up at a very young age, teenager or younger, outside. So I think this is a generation that we see that they're creating spaces for not only their voices, but our voices. They are speaking loud the words that we were choking. This is a generation that's striving for social justice. This is a generation that they are part of, they see their native country as part of the global South, not in isolation, Afghanistan, Somalia, Sudan, but as part of the global South, in the actors and players around it, the big games around us. This is a generation, we are within Afghanistan, we are within blaming of each other, but I think the new generation see it in a bigger perspective of the global players and why these wars are happening, who benefit from war, who benefit from fight. So we still have long ways and collective efforts on alarming issues in Canada, the need for consistent decolonizations of systems, addressing racism, Islamophobia, other forms of phobias, Canada's roles in displacement, the brain draining of professionals from abroad, and here in Canada, immigrants as a cheap labor, doctors, engineers, where they are, taxi drivers, pizza deliverers, and to create spaces for greater inclusivity. So it is very important. So these are all sad facts, but the important thing is these are processes. And with each new member into the community, this process has and continue to add to our collective knowledge and create spaces for greater inclusivity. So I know that there will be other wonderful discussions from each one of you. Hopefully this is a space for all of you to share your own stories of migration. I will end here with my profound thanks to Professor Parindosa, who has a lot of respect from all of us for her years of hard work, advocacy around women, migrant women, refugee women, and particularly women for certain regions that are war-torn regions. Also, I want to thank you, the SFU team, for having this event wonderfully organized. And thanks to, with my thoughts and prayers to all the women right now under war, oppression, deprivation, and particularly with the people of Palestine under genocide. I wish you all and all of us, our families and community, a happy International Women's Day. Thank you.
Covered a lot of ground.
We highlighted dilemmas and aspirations, but also bringing in the work that the younger generation has to do is really very important, and probably we can give more thought to it. And that leads to generational continuity. That's what we are hoping for. Our third speaker is Shahnaz Kayumi. She has an MA in developmental psychology and pedagogy, is a faculty of the Early Childhood Educational Department at Langara College. She received her master's certificate from the Harvard program Global Mental Health, Trauma and Recovery in 2014. In Afghanistan, she worked as an assistant professor at the Department of Psychology at Kabul University. However, because of the communist regime, she was forced to flee Afghanistan. Although she faced challenges such as language, culture, and educational barriers, she established herself in the Canadian academic community. In 2012, she became the Chief Operating Officer of Partnership Afghanistan Canada. She is built the Center of Excellence for Innovation and Research for Kabul University. Shahnaz also writes for children. We'd like to see some of your work.
Thank you very much, everyone. First of all, thank you very much, Dr. Joseph, for organizing an event that is so important and close to my heart. And thank you, each and every one of you, to come here. And also, thank you very much for people who are actually virtually joining us and listening to our stories of hopelessness, displacement, and making home. Immigration is a very complex process. And it comes with lots of losses. Loss of attachment to space and land that you born and raised. Losses of belonging. Culture, language, religious practices, and most of all, emotional connectedness to beloved one that you leave behind in the community. Because Afghanistan is a collective community, and the community and neighbors, everybody is actually having a significant role in shaping who you are. Before I'm gonna tell you my personal life story, I just wanna give you a little bit of the history of the time I was growing in Afghanistan. And I know that Gulalai and Saida also actually touched that time. Afghanistan has always had a very rich cultural heritage, values, and traditions. Women were the pride of Afghan families. And my story started it with this beautiful, beautiful memory that I have growing up in Afghanistan. I actually never felt discriminated for my gender. Everything was available for me when I was growing. Of course, within the same culture, there's family culture. And But unfortunately, the happy life ended when Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan to support the formation of communist government who just started ruling Afghanistan. And the Communist Party of Afghanistan had a slogan: if you're not with us, you're against us. Therefore, people who refused to join the Communist Party, they were either killed, jailed, or they disappeared from the surface of the face of the world. And actually in 2008, just, not that far, so there was a huge group graveyard was found in Afghanistan, and those were the people who were disappeared. Anyway, my story of immigration started it with a loud knock of my door at the Kabul University, where I was teaching. Two men invited themselves to my office. And announcing that they have a good news for me. And they right away put a picture of a man in front of me and asked me if I know the man. I was looking at the man who was dressed in Afghan traditional clothes with a long beard and a turban. And they said, we don't have time. This is your husband. They didn't even wait for my answer. And they said, okay, tell your families and your father-in-law who was blaming us for his disappearance that he's not only alive, but he's fighting on the other side of the mountain against us. And they slammed the door and left. The world went dark around me. And all I was thinking about my son, at that time, he was only 6, that he is going to be lonely and growing without mother and father. And I knew, and they said when they were leaving, that they're gonna come soon and talk to us. So I don't know how I actually got home, but the only thing I was thinking to get out of this dark tunnel was to escape from Afghanistan. Afghanistan, a country that I called home yesterday, today seems so strange. And all I did that night, just packed a change of clothes, and we couldn't take our passport or any ID, no diploma, nothing that was precious and memorable for me. And I borrowed a burqa, and the next day we were on our way to leave Afghanistan. The road was long, bumpy and windy in the back of the truck, and we were stopped every 2-3 kilometers. And we were asked for money and jewelry, whatever we have to give away. Anyway, we made it on the other side of the mountain. And I was very happy for my sons and my life, but not knowing that the difficulty is gonna start now. We the only hope we had in Pakistan when we were there, and Gulala also touched this, the only hope that kept us alive was that things are going to change in Afghanistan. We're not going to stay here. So we are only temporary. And as a refugee, we're moving from one city to another city. But the time was going by, and we were not thinking of making home. And the Afghanistan situation went from bad to worse. And we lost our hope to return back to our home. Therefore, we thought we're going to just leave for our future of our son, for his education. But soon we realized that we don't even have passport. And if you don't have a passport, you don't have identity. If you don't have identity, you're not welcome for just being a human, but you have to have an ID. It was very difficult, but we found out that you can also buy false passports. And we bought an Iranian passport with the different names, and we actually flew to Portugal. And why Portugal? Because Portugal was the only country that didn't need any visa for Iranian. And we arrived, and the very next day, we went to United Nations and we told them who we are and what country we are coming. And they gave us a temporary Portuguese passport. So we still wanted to choose our last destination that we can call it home. And we start searching where we can make home. We had families in Europe. They were encouraging us to come to Europe. We had family in the state, and they were encouraging, but we thought we're going to find a place that we're going to be welcomed. And we actually found a place, and it was Canada. Canada was a place of indigenous people who graciously share their land with very first European, and it was open after for whoever needed to live with them and share the land. So therefore, we actually applied for immigration status. Within 6 months, we were accepted as a landed immigrant, and we arrived to Vancouver. I never forget, I still vividly remember that night that we arrived to Vancouver. The city looked beautiful, the people looked happy, and we were directly brought to a motel that immigration used. It was, I still remember, and it still exists. It is called English Bay Motel. And we stayed there for a few weeks, and then we were encouraged to find a place. Anyway, we were happy that now finally we have chosen our home, but how to make it a home, it's another story. At the time we immigrated, Canada was experiencing economic recession. So there was not a system to help a new settlement. The only thing we were hoping to get out of all, if they could introduce us to some English classes that they were offering. They said, yes, there are classes, but unfortunately they're all full. So you can actually, you have to wait up until following year. And we actually landed June 1983. And we had to wait to 84 to be able to attend English classes. But they did encourage us to go and find job. And we thought, how can we work if we don't know the language and our education or credential is not accepted? It's not equivalent of North America. But we didn't give up. The movement and also the strong bonding and attachment that we had with our home help us to stand up. It was very hard because we didn't have that secure base that usually a child explore the world. We were on our own. So we had to learn how to sit, stand, and walk and talk without a wise mother who is there to guide you and to show you. Anyway, so we thought we have to learn the English. We found our way to library and we self-taught ourselves English. At the time when we were, there were books with cassettes. So we would just drop our son at school and go to the library. And after 6 months, we went to immigration and we were able to communicate and express our thoughts. And we said, well, now we speak the language. So the immigration officer who was working with us, and he said, wow, that's really nice. And by the way, I actually put your resume together here. And I found a job for you. There's a lady who is opening a center in Coquitlam. And at that time, Coquitlam sounded a very strange name to me. But you just go and for interview. But anyway, I remember we took 2-3 buses to get to Coquitlam, and we found our way. The lady was very polite, very respectful, but she said, she looked at my resume and she said, lady, I'm supposed to be your teacher and you want to come and work for me? I just need an assistant. The assistant doesn't have to have even a certificate, but if you have master's degree and all that, I'll be intimidated if you're going to be working for me. I'll be constantly thinking you're judging me. And I was with my very broken English language. No, please give me this opportunity. I want to work. I want to be independent. And she was very nice, but she said no. Anyway, the second job, people thought, well, since I have a master's degree, I may be qualified to work at UBC in research center. And I went, and God bless him, Dr. Dixon. He passed away. He became my professor because I had to go to UBC. And I showed my resume, and he said, this is the chair that I'm sitting. Actually, you're supposed to be sitting here. You're qualified with the chair. Since I'm taking this chair, so there is no chair for you. So this is how I started it. But we never give up. In the life, falling and getting up made us resilient. And we were determined that we're going to make Canada our home. It took us 10 years to show and prove to Canada that we are someone and we can make it home. Thank you very much. And I don't want to take more than 15 minutes as the time was given to me. If you have any question, you can ask later. Thank you.
I wasn't
Wish like
sure.
like your sentence, we fall, but we never get up again. That's really inspiring. So now it's time for questions. Oh, you want to show the slides?
Yeah, I wasn't sure when to change them. So yeah. Yeah, we can quickly.
This one is Heritage Day that I actually share this for Afghan tradition. 12. And so these are actually some of the images that the community actually and dances except in Sayyida John's daughter. I was actually a speaker at the first about 2,000 Arabians actually died or were killed actually during the Russian invasion, and that situation that 1 million women actually widows. While we are center actually it's outwards. One of that march against some called that walk. Actually, project children actually we also provided for food, and we actually collected all the wounds and then we did something that was amazing. These are actually my books. The next page that I published. What my recent book is actually was released by BC book, and it's about Zia's story. And this is actually also tells the story of our immigration and escaping from Afghanistan with my little son at that time. So these are in a couple of my books was translated in Farsi and Pashto, and I actually donated about 1,000 books in Afghanistan to children. Okay, and these are the lady is. This is the art done by Afghan women when I was in Herat. Okay, thank you.